ACC men's hoops was full of great games, but it was the women who had surprising upsets that we want to touch base on today, as well as some college football playoff championship predictions. Will TCU finally be one of the biggest underdogs to take the crown? Let's talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Locked On ACC. I'm your host, Candace Cooper, joined by Kenton Gibbs of Locked On Wolfpack. Each and every day, you can find us here at Locked On ACC Pod, whether you listen audio style, wherever you listen to podcasts, or via YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel. We are on the road to 1,000. We are super excited. If you hit that subscribe button, you let us know how you feel about things. On today's episode, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to talk about some basketball that took place over the weekend, as well as some college football playoff conversations. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people that you want to use faster for free. Post your job free at linkedinjobs.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Ken Gibbs, how are you feeling? How was the weekend for you?
I'm feeling great. It was a very eventful weekend for me. I went and tried a new restaurant that was absolutely delectable. Other than that, just pretty much chilled back. How about yourself?
You know, it was a great weekend, getting ready to celebrate another year of life for myself, but super excited for the opportunity to talk shop here around conference news. Let's get right into it as we touch base on some really good men's basketball games that happened on Saturday. A lot of good predictions. If you listen to the Locked On ACC podcast on Friday, we had Drizzy Drake, who was giving us all of the best betting action. So if you won some money, make sure you put that in the subscription or put that in the comments as you talk to us on YouTube. Up first, we had at the crack of dawn, North Carolina and Notre Dame taking off 81-64 victory for the Tar Heels, who are looking like better and better shape to potentially be ranked in the top 25 going into this week. It's about time that we see this Carolina team that Armando Bacot, once again ACC Player of the Week, is really coming into form and shape.
You know, this was the UNC beating Notre Dame game that we all kind of saw coming, right? Because while everybody is talking all the mess about Louisville, there's another team in the conference that does not have a single conference win yet. And that team, ladies and gentlemen, would be Notre Dame. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Notre Dame right now, but it just seems like they cannot get it together. They cannot consistently string together a series of stops when they need it, or their offense just goes ice cold. It's just, you don't know what's going to go wrong for Notre Dame on any given night. But I mean, you know, it's a tough time. It's always going to be a tough time when, you know, your starters or your starting backcourt is combining for I want to say this is 10 of 30 actually, between your backcourt of Hammond, Ryan, and Goodwin. You're not going to win like that. You're not going to win like that, especially against a UNC team that, like we've talked about many a time, they have one of the most dominant forces in all of college basketball in Armando Bacot. You're not going to win with your backcourt just pretty much drawing a blank.
Absolutely. And it's tough for Nate Laszewski, who we're used to seeing be pretty consistent, but was only 1-for-1 from the 3-point range. And you look at the fact that they have no bench help for real, like combined only about 11 points. I think that's one of the more challenging parts of their story. And, you know, Coach Bray can do all he can, but if you just don't have the horses in the stable, it's just not going to necessarily work out for you. And it was just very evident that North Carolina was the more talented team. So Notre Dame falls to 8-8 on the season, while Carolina picks up and gets another ACC win to make it 11-5 for them. Let's switch gears, talk about the rival across the road, Duke Blue Devils taking on Boston College in a close matchup. They were in Chestnut Hill, and Boston College had all the things to make this upset real. I thought Duke was going to come in and with Likely and company feel a little more thrively. lively as
I
they
was just
tried
about
to
to say lively in the word, but I got you. I'm here with you. I'm here
as they
with you.
tried to figure out how to bounce back after that NC State loss, but it was close down to the wire. The Blue Devils were able to pull it off, but it's safe to say that they are definitely on the cusp of being a top 25 ranked team and not, because Earl Grant and company certainly gave them a lot to play for. Dang, why am I having word vomit today? But let me try that a bit again. Langford was able to, help the Boston College in a positive way. And I think ultimately Duke just had the upper hand with talent.
Every time, and here's the interesting thing about this game. Every time it seemed like Duke was going to pull away and this game was over, Boston College just fought back and fought back and fought back and made it close and made it close and made it close. All throughout that second half, there were multiple points where Duke is up double digits multiple times. I believe the lead ballooned to 12 or 14 at one point in time. All that, even through all that, this Boston College team just kept fighting, kept fighting, kept fighting. And then you look up and you're like, oh, well, look at that. They're right in this thing at the end with a chance to win it. And although, things don't always work out at the end, and there was some very interesting play calling down the stretch, this is still a situation where you tip your hats to Boston College, and you also look at Duke and say, hey, what's going on? Why are you struggling with this Boston College team? And yes, I know you're on the road, and this team has struggled a lot on the road, but still, it's hard to come up with an excuse to struggle against Boston College.
And if we look at these first two games and we talk about good, bad, and ugly that we usually do on Monday's show, to me, it's ugly that Notre Dame still hasn't had an ACC win. And it's bad that Duke is even struggling against teams like NC State and Boston College. And it really, for me, is all the good of you show that Boston College can hang with the best of them. North Carolina's getting back on track. But of these two matchups, I'm just sitting there saying to myself, there's a lot of identity coming into play with who certain teams are as we're really hammering down on conference play.
I don't know. After this weekend, I'm not just saying this because I'm a state grad. I don't know if this is you shouldn't be competing with this NC State team because the boys went up there and showed us something decent up in Blacksburg. I'm just saying.
100%. Let's talk about the Georgia Tech Florida State matchup here real quick. Georgia Tech unable to figure out how to win against the Florida State Seminoles, a Florida State team that has been desperate for wins, not necessarily having the horses in stable whatsoever. Leonard Hamilton has been so tested when it comes to his coaching ability with only, 7 starters on the night, but they were able to beat the Yellow Jackets team who just beat a Miami team. So it's just really all over the place when we talk about men's conference and standings.
I'm going to just tell you this team here, we always talk about the length that Florida State has, but another part of that goes with their depth, and having all the injuries makes it extremely tough. However, Matthew Cleveland showing up having a big night absolutely helped. Green Jr. showing up having a big night absolutely helped. The fact of the matter is, if Darren Green Jr. doesn't show up in the way that he did in this game, I don't think Florida State has a chance of winning in the way that they did, because if you look at their bench, they only got 7 points from the entire bench. So you don't win a game like this without absolutely mammoth performances from your starters, and every starter scored at least 8 points for Florida State. So this is, they walk away with a win here, and it's a tough earn, tightly contested win, but they walk away with a win here. The one thing that I do find interesting is this Florida State team, and all we talk about with their length and all that good stuff, not a single block in this game. Not a single block. Very surprising for me, but they still come away with a win against Georgia Tech.
No doubt about it. These are 3 great matchups as we're getting rolling into the good, bad, and ugly here for our Locked On ACC podcast. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. I know you guys are always sleeping on LinkedIn, but I'm telling you what, if you're trying to put up a job, if you're trying to find a job, this is the website for you as a small business owner or hiring manager. The success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We're rocking and rolling talking about men's basketball here, doing a recap of Saturday's matchups. Wake Forest took on Louisville, a Louisville team that we had recently mentioned has desperately looked for a win by any means necessary, not even just a conference win, just a win in general. But now they are a 2-14 team after taking the L 80-72. Competitive. We will say that they were a competitive team. We saw some good things out of Mr. James. I think that ultimately, Mike James is one person and he needs a hell of a lot more help to have a double-digit points from the rest of his, starting five. But it was, of course, the Demon Deacons and Monsanto and company that were able to pull out a big dub for the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. If you were talking,
Louisville started this game off on an 8-0 run. It looked so promising. It looked like this was the time for them to get their first conference win. It looked like this was the moment. And even after that 8-0 run got broken, they still fought back, battled back, kept a big lead. We're up. I want to say that they were up at one point in time, 24-7 or 27-7 actually, and then it went all downhill. It just was. After that point, it was like Wake Forest woke up and said, wait a minute, we're losing the who? And it was just, again, to lead 43-26, to walk into a situation where you start the game off on a strong note, you start the game off at a very positive rate, and then to just like completely and utterly basically fizzle out down the stretch, that's tough. That's tough. And you know what? I may have that a little backwards. I believe Wake Forest was the team that started off leading, but either way it goes, it's such a tough time for Louisville right now. This is one of those historically bad seasons that we talked about at the beginning of the season. We hope they didn't have, because again, it's good for the conference when more teams are good. But again, Wake Forest started this thing off leading, and I believe this was a wire-to-wire victory, even though Louisville did their best to fight back and make this game look closer, final score, than it actually was. In terms of what the scoreboard said at the final buzzer.
No doubt about it. Closest game of the weekend. We saw Clemson take on Pitt, and the Clemson Tigers had no bench, but it was no problem as your starters were able to hold themselves accountable. You had Hunter Tyson doing what he does best, PJ Hall having a double-double, but it was Chase Hunter with his 17 points on the night that were able to, without help, propel the Tigers to a victory 75-74 over the Panthers. And to me, I think they're both good teams. I think, there's no bad or ugly between them. The fact that they are two of the best in the conference right now is very telling, considering where we usually discuss Clemson and Pittsburgh. On the football side, it's very obvious that these teams are rolling in the right direction.
Absolutely. And this was a very toughly contested, hard-fought game. This game came down to the wire, could have went either way. And the fact of the matter is simple. At the end of the day, I think that Clemson just had the slightly better players going down the stretch. I think that their players knew what to do in terms of it's winning time. How do we get this thing done just a little bit better? When you talk about all that PJ Hall does on offense, and yet he came up with a massive block on the Jamarius Burton layup toward the end of the game there. And then when you go beyond that, you look at the fact that when Clemson recovered the ball after that, who did they get the ball to? Hunter Tyson. And what did he do? Seal the game with 2 free throws. You talk about Tyson and you talk about Hall and all that they do, and sometimes you forget that the best players are not extraordinary in all these crazy ways. Sometimes the best players just do the ordinary things extra well, and that showed in terms of PJ Hall's defense and Hunter's free throw shooting down the stretch.
We want to talk about Virginia, and sometimes we thought they were going to be bad and ugly towards this season because they couldn't quite figure things out, but it was a 73-66 victory over Syracuse that made us a little more confident in these starters, these veteran leaders that the Cavaliers had. And although Judah Mintz and Joe Girard put up as much as they could between 18 and 19 points respectively, I think it was just Virginia figuring out how to play all-around basketball and sharing the rock, getting the scores that they needed to and defending really well against a really, halfway decent Syracuse team.
At the end of the day, let's just be honest about this situation, right? This offense for Virginia runs through Kihei Clark in a way that I have not seen in quite some time. Kihei Clark is a guy who dominates the game without scoring much because he sets the tempo, sets the pace, a game high 11 assists. He is the guy that is the maestro of this offense. He orchestrates it whenever their offense is going well. Kihei is getting in the lane. He is getting good dribble penetration. They're getting out in transition with him having the ball in his hand. And guess what? He's going to make the right decision more often than not. Now, the question for them becomes, how often can you get out in transition? How often can you beat a team like Syracuse and that you're not allowing them to get set up in their zone and all that? Or if they do get set up, you're getting good dribble penetration by your guards that sucks in the defense so you can kick it out, find somebody wide open. And, shooting 46% from three ain't a bad time either against that zone. So, they did what they did and came away with a good win in terms of Syracuse, in terms of beating Syracuse in this game.
Final game you want to touch on here on the men's side of things, NC State went up to Blacksburg and got a victory 73-69 against the Hokies. And we're saying here, good, bad, and ugly, it's really looking good for NC State right now. And Coach Keats, a lot of people had written him off and saying that he was not going to be able to live past this contract extension. But it's very clear that these young boys are excited about playing for him. They're excited about playing for NC State, which to me, I really haven't seen in a long time, right? You see some guys that are really good, but it's like having the pride of playing for NC State feels like there's a shift there between Joyner and Taquavion Smith. And I'm hoping that that momentum keeps going as they progress through this conference play of the season.
I want to talk about a guy you just mentioned there, and Jarkel Joyner, 2 games straight, back-to-back, no turnovers. Jarkel Joyner is the primary ball handler in this offense. Now, while we would like to see his assist numbers up to where they were against Duke, that's fine. But the reality is, if you have a point guard that is not turning the ball over, and you have guys that are scoring the ball well, like what him and Terquavion do, and then throw in Casey Morcell striping from deep, you're looking at a really, really tough time on defenses. But I will say this. This was a good win, and good teams find ways to win. I'm not sure if I'm ready to call this NC State team a good team just yet. However, they shot very poorly from the field. And again, Coach Keats, I'm looking at you. They need some sets. They need some sets. They need something that can get them in the rhythm, get them some easy looks, because ISO ball works until it doesn't. ISO ball works until Terquavion or Jarkel go cold, until Casey is having a bad night. And then all of a sudden, you're looking at a totally different situation. So this was a very, very quality. I want to say this was a quad 1 win by NC State. But, at the end of the day, Virginia Tech, you got to protect your home court. They seem to be struggling and kind of flailing in conference. And that can't be the case. Justin Mutz has to show up bigger than, 9 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 turnovers. He has to show up bigger than that. And if he's not going to show up bigger than that, somebody else has to step up, which, hey, Padula and Maddox did a great job of scoring in this game. But again, you're going to need Mutz to be the leader of this team if you're going to go anywhere.
I just think it's very also telling how good this conference is right now in terms of every night you have to give your best. Every night you're going to have to come with it because there is a team that is in desperate need of an ACC win, of a quad 1 win, or just something to where they can put themselves in the right position come tournament time, where they're going to have to make a great run in the conference play, or when you're even fighting for their resume to get into NCAA tournament time. So men's is rolling, but the women upset squad is just insane. Let's talk about a couple of the highlights and upsets of the weekend really quickly here. North Carolina taking on Notre Dame, and it seems like what the men do, the women will follow. In North Carolina getting their first conference win of the season. We had talked about it last week. We didn't know whether they were going to turn things around because they had some really good matches ahead of them, but this 60-50 victory for the Tar Heels is why I feel like there's no need to panic, but one game at a time certainly is what it's going to take for the Heels.
Part of it was defensive intensity. Another part of it was Notre Dame had one of the worst shooting performances I've ever seen.
Yes.
They could not throw a rock in the ocean from the beach.
Second half especially.
They might have struggled to throw a rock in the ocean from a boat in the ocean, the way that this team was looking. 2 of 22 from deep. You're never going to win with that. That is not a winning recipe at all. And so to see that this team kind of, at the end of the day, when you look at this Notre Dame team and you look at what they're doing when they're at their best, they're playing off Olivia Miles. She's leading this thing. She's got it. She's got that Kihei Clark in her, but with a lot better scoring, like bar none. And for her to have a 1-to-1 turnover to assist ratio in this game shows the type of ball pressure, shows the type of stifling defense that, UNC found a way to play on her, and they came away with the upset because of it.
1,000%. Other upsets that we want to talk about here, if you have not gotten in on the betting action, you might as well do so. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. If you love sports podcasts as well, you can even find those at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting info, so head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Now, if you had your money on Boston College women taking down Florida State, I would have called you a liar. The 77-71 victory was quite telling for just where Boston College is as a program. They have wins that they can give you little flashes, right? I think at times you're like, okay, I'm not sure which program's going to give me what I need. But overall, I think that the Eagles are a team that every one of those, you got to come with your best, because they are certainly coming with theirs.
The surprising part about this game was to see that Florida State was fledging down the stretch, even though they're the deeper team. They're the team that has the deeper bench, and yet the team that's only playing 7 deep is the ones that wore them down. And in overtime, it looked like they had nothing left. It looked like they just could not get anything going and were struggling to make even the most rudimentary of plays in overtime. So that was something that I found just very, very interesting. But again, another very big game from Dontavia Wagner. She's stringing these things together back to back to back. I think that she's looking at if she continues this type of play, shoe in for ACC Most Improved Player and all that type of jazz. But this is, I'll tell you what, like you said, you cannot take a night off.
And
on the women's side, can't do it.
Absolutely. I think Tennille Lotson having an off night is just something that we're not used to seeing from Florida State. I think Aaron Howard only having 5 points from the floor and just not really being a factor, being 1 of 6 on the night is certainly something from 3-point that you just cannot afford. And, for whatever reason, I love the women's game, but sometimes when I see some of these threes, I'm like, did we run the play? Did we try to play at least once before we aired it out? Just let me know that. Just one good time. Let me see the play that you drew up before we're just shooting the rock and feeling a little too overconfident with that 3 ball. I know this is the thing. I know Curry is the man. He has changed the game, but sometimes that's not your shot, and a layup does you just fine. So I think that's something, as I'm giving you the PSA, I am not a hooper, but I know fundamentals. I am team fundamentals. Tim Duncan is one of my favorite players for a reason. It's okay if you hit a bank shot. It goes in all the same. Another upset on the night, Miami beating number 9 Virginia Tech 77-66. Not just beating, but beating handedly. This Miami team is no joke. You got the Cavendish twins. You also have you also have a team that just always gives you fight every single night. Miami's going to give you their best. And it's certainly something that we saw throughout this matchup against the Hokies. And Miss Kitley, sometimes it's not your night.
I'm sorry, but it's tough for me to just look at Elizabeth Kitley here, because yes, she did get into some very bad foul trouble. Yes, her and Soleil both got into some very, very ticky-tack fouls and whatnot. But the reality is, Georgia Moore, what's going on? We need something. We need you to show up just a little better in terms of, if Kitley is having an off night, you're supposed to be the second in command. Kayla King, you're another elder statesman. You're another part of why this team has been ranked as highly as they are all year, and you don't do much to show up as well. And so, that's going to be a tough time for this team. And then the other part of this that I really look at and I say, I'm a little bit surprised that Miami was able to do this. Generally, Virginia Tech's bigs do a fairly good job of staying out of foul trouble. And to see that pretty much everybody that stepped on the court that was above the height of 5'10" for them had 4 fouls, that's tough. 4 or more fouls, including Kitley and Soleil both fouling out. That's tough. You're not going to be able to overcome that. You're not going to be able to overcome undisciplined ball in that regard.
Yeah, 1,000%. And before we get out of here, we'd be remiss if we did not touch on the college football playoff championship game. We know that is going to be a big one. Georgia is already at 13.5 favorite over the TCU Horned Frogs, but crazier things have happened. If you saw the highlights from the semifinals, you know that TCU is coming with it. They definitely will give you their best ball and give you their best shot. You cannot count them out. I think Duggan and them do have a chance. As much as people are writing them off, I was in the grocery store today and someone said they don't have a chance in hell. And I said, okay, but that's why you play the game. So if I was a betting woman, I definitely put some dollars down on TCU.
See, you're gonna make me do my coach's voice for this one, okay?
No, Lord.
You got a better chance of taking on hell with a squirt gun, son. That's what I would say if somebody asked me what I would think about putting money down on TCU. Michigan did everything that they could to lose that ball game. They did everything that they could. Everybody, I believe that Michigan's offensive line won the award for the best offensive line this season. And they were running Philly special on the 2-yard line.
Tried to be cute.
Tried to be cute. When sometimes you just be you. Be you. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, we all know how the song goes. Don't forget who brought you to the dance. We know Blake Corum was out. Donovan Edwards is still one of the better backs. Donovan Edwards is one of those backs. If he wasn't behind Blake Corum, if he was anywhere else in the country, I could probably name 7, 8 schools where he wouldn't be the starter. And for whatever reason, they got punched in the mouth up front early. And then at the end, kind of tried to pick it up and come back and all that. And they did everything that they could to get back into the game. But again, at the end of the day, when you're playing a inferior opponent, you cannot let it be close. You cannot let them get energy, stick around, stay around. And the problem for TCU in this game is Georgia doesn't do that. They don't let teams stick around, stay around, all that good stuff.
But I mean, if you talk about the Ohio State game, did we see the national championship game in the semifinals in terms of Marvin Harrison Jr.? We saw how Ohio State gave them the best that they've got. We had a couple, maybe it was targeting, maybe it wasn't calls from Georgia on the Georgia side of things. And you have Stetson Bennett, who is Mr. JUCO himself, like he's coming a long way. If you put Stetson Bennett up against Duggan, who would you pick as a quarterback?
Oh, I pick Duggan all day and twice tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll pick them all day and twice on Sunday. But the reality is this: football is about a lot more than one guy. And
sure.
At pretty much every other position, I'm looking around and I'm saying, all right, who wins this matchup? Georgia. Okay, who wins this matchup? Georgia. Okay, who has the better position? Georgia. All right, the better.
So you give them no chance, TCU.
Again, I will give them a chance of slim to none. And Slim done said, my crew, let's go. He done put his top hat on. He done put the jacket on. He heading out the door.
Will they cover?
I doubt it.
I think it's gonna come down to a touchdown. I think it's gonna be 7 points.
I mean, hey, we can all think things, we can all wish things, we can all hope things. It don't mean
this is the national championship game. I think you're talking like you're not giving TCU enough credit.
Hey, listen, great story. Great year. Sonny Dykes, they'll be back. Hopefully. Who knows? They'll be back. But those Georgia Bulldogs, it's a little different. I'm telling you, and let me tell you this. And watching that game with Georgia and Ohio State,
sure,
Ohio State played out of their minds, above their heads. There was not a single position group on that Ohio State team except maybe their linebacking core that I didn't think, oh man, I didn't know that they had this in them. CJ Stroud, everybody said that he has the yips and that he's very bad at handling pressure. Managed it like a true professional. They said, well, CJ Stroud, athletically, he can run. He's too scared to run. Had his most ever scrambling yards in design passes in a game. That was everything. They threw everything. In the words of Future, they dedicated every redacted thing to this. They came up short. I don't think TCU is quite the team that Ohio State is.
Well, that's why they play the game. Like I said, I think it comes down to one touchdown. You think that they're going to get blown out? We'll talk about this recap here tomorrow, as well as some game predictions for our ACC basketball teams. And, we're talking about way too early football. I might argue that Florida State will be in the college football playoff conversation next year. Debate me if you will. All right, let's do it. We'll leave that on the bone. For Candace Cooper and Kenton Gibbs, I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. And more importantly, come back tomorrow for more ACC news. Until next time.